The Irrational Confidence Podcast. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of The Irrational Confidence Podcast. We're talking college football, and we are back for another season. It is the fifth season that we have talked college football with all of you. I'm joined by my co-host, the man I could not live without, Fresh. Welcome back to another year. We took a nice little summer break here.
Relax, recharge the batteries. Well, it's great to be back with college football. Ironically, today LSU won the baseball championship, ends that college season, and now we're in a fresh start going forward. And really excited to talk about our five of our top 25 preseason teams here as we go through that list and get ourselves toward kickoff.
Yeah, it's summertime. It's heating up outside, and before you know it, we're going to be to Farmageddon during Week 0. K-State, Iowa State in Dublin, Ireland. Guys, if you aren't with us already, if you first time finding this podcast, make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. It doesn't cost you anything. We're going to 2,500 subscribers into this season, and join us along the way because we got a lot of fun stuff planned for this upcoming year. But Fresh, we're not here just for that. We're here to go into our preseason top 25. Folks, a little bit before we unroll the first team, what Fresh and I do, we both rank our teams 1 through 25. We do it blindly, don't do it together. Then we share, we aggregate the number, and any tie that we have is broken by our producer, Drew. He's a big help this season because I think we had 23 out of 25 teams together, but a lot of ties this year.
But I think that comes into play as we go forward in this list and even in the season where the transfer portal, guys changing school so many all over the place at a rapid high rate. You really have no idea what you're actually getting. In addition to that, you have coaching changes, freshmen coming in. Sometimes even the magazines, if they were even released early, don't even have the exact correct roster because guys transferred in the middle of the summer. So it's a lot of things moving and shaking, but right now we're going to do the best we can about who we know was on the squads right now and where we think they're going to be going as the season kicks off.
Yeah. All right, Fresh, let's kick it off. Our number 25 team coming in, rounding out our top 25. It is the Texas A&M Aggies. Mike Elko is back, second year over there. They were 8-5 last year. That opening game against Notre Dame, one of the better games in college football, one of the better defensive games if you're a fan of defense there. They got great O-line coming back. They got great rushing attack, arguably the nation's best rushing attack. We could make an argument there. They got a lot of great guys coming back there. And big-time transfer, Casey Concepcion, one of our favorite names, from NC State. Big-time receiver for him. They don't got much else other than him on the wide receiver spot. But what do you got for Texas A&M?
Well, I was on a fringe like 25 to 28, somewhere in that range the entire time I was
Right.
ranking them because, you did lose three very, very solid NFL players off the front seven in Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner, and Nick Scorton. The offense last year, Wagner was starting quarterback. Offense really didn't show much. Then Le'Veon Moss, he got hurt. The team kind of fell off there offensively. Marcel Reed did his best he possibly could to keep the offense moving, but they never really gelled. Colin Klein, I think the offensive coordinator, is going to have to really step his game up this year to make sure that Marcel Reed and that offense are ready to rock and roll. Reed, he showed flashes at times in the Auburn game and the Texas game, but they lost both of them. They just couldn't finish when it mattered. I want to see how they operate. Now, I mentioned Le'Veon Moss, big solid running back. They were 7-1 when he was in the lineup. When he got hurt with the season-ending injury, they were 1-4 down the stretch. So obviously you can't put it all on one guy as a running back, but he made a huge difference in that offense to give them some reliability, give them some way to manage down distance, maintain drives, and finish in the red zone. If he can be healthy and they can mix in other running backs and give him some breaks, that'll help them go forward. But the passing game is going to have to really evolve. Reed, you mentioned Concepcion. Who else is going to be that number 2, number 3 receiver who's going to really step up and give them a lift, give them some clutch plays on third down? It's really going to help. That's what they were lacking. If you watch the Texas game at the very end of the year, they were fighting for their lives. They had a chance of potentially being a SEC championship game participant, fringe playoff team even there at the end of the year. They just couldn't find a way to make a play down the stretch offensively to beat Texas. They had chances middle through the ballgame. You kept thinking, all right, they're going to finally get it done. The defense was playing for their lives, but the offense just could not score. That's their biggest challenge coming into this season. They do return 4 stars on the offensive line, and they return 7 total stars on the defense. Mike Elko, defensive genius, I think is built for Texas A&M. He embodies the fan base. He embodies the culture. That team played fantastic defense under him with all the players they had gotten in there. If he can keep those guys, coach them up, get them to play, and build that depth on the defensive side, that puts again the focus on the offense. If they can really take that next step and move forward, Concepcion, I got 2 years ago in the NC State team, he was really really good. Last year they had quarterback issues, injuries there. He never got it going. That entire team actually never got it going. If he can return to form of 2023, I think that gives them a big boost in the passing game and helps them win some ball games late when they were lacking last year. Their toughest four-game stretch this year is October 11th when they host the Gators, 18th at Arkansas, November 25th at LSU, and then November 8th at Missouri. Outside of that, yes, they got to play Notre Dame, but if you can manage that four-game stretch, somehow find a way to come 3-1 out of there, it puts you in a good spot. The Texas game at the end of the year obviously is going to be a big deal this year in Austin, but if you can somehow manage that stretch, beating Florida is not as it's not going to be impossible. I think they're a very good football team. They're going to be a lot better than they have been in the past, but that's not going to be an unreachable task coming in this game if they can play some solid defense. Arkansas, you never know what team you're going to face. LSU is always going to be a crazy battle, and then Missouri, I think Missouri's on a downward trend. So if you can come 2-2, 3-1 out of that stretch, you're probably in a good spot to uh, depending how that Notre Dame game goes, maybe have a thought of being on that fringe for a playoff spot. But you're going to have to get the defense playing consistently, and the offense is going to take that next step if they're going to want to see any kind of play of football in Aggie land this year.
Fresh, on my notes here, I have the running game can be possibly elite. This is a really good rushing attack, especially when you return four offensive linemen there. I like Amari Daniels a lot as a spellback, especially if Le'Veon Moss has some lingering rust maybe with that injury that he's got to come back from. You get spring or you get the fall camp to work that out and be back to 100%, but you never know with an athlete. You never know how well they're going to return. And you take a look at their schedule. Again, that Notre Dame game is going to be one of the games that I think a lot of Aggie fans have circled. You got two games to get warmed up with UTSA and Utah State there. If Reed can push himself up to like a 65, 68% passer, I don't think he's got to get past that magical 70% mark for this team to be ridiculously good, but he's got to be better than 61%. And
Yeah,
he's going to
he's
be
got to mature.
right. He can rely on this running game, especially if Texas A&M can get a lead and they can run the ball and milk the clock. It's going to be a great thing for the Aggies here. I have a question for their defense, though. Just like you said, they lost three major players to the NFL draft last year, and two of those guys were very high draft picks. And I looked at it, and I was kind of shocked because Mike Elko's got a name for defense, and this defensive front only had 34 sacks last year. I feel like they need to, for them to really to take that next step and A&M to be, I don't necessarily know if they're going to be in the same conversation as Texas and Georgia, who I think is the cream of the crop for the SEC this year. But for them to be in that conversation with Alabama, South Carolina, maybe Florida, let's see what they do here. I think that he's got to get to 39, 40 sacks right there, somewhere that might be the sweet spot for that defense to get elite. Interesting to see what Patrick Payton does. Transfer from Florida State with them.
Mm-hmm.
Good pickup there. I'm intrigued to see what he's going to be able to do in an Elko defense there. Interesting thing though, last year against the spread, 3-10. This is not a great team to take against the spread.
No.
Interesting thing with them because of how they're going to run the football and play defense this year. Those numbers should stay low. Again, if you're seeing double outside of games against like Utah State, UTSA, but if you're looking at games against like Arkansas and Florida and that spread is in the double digits, I'd actually would, avoid these games from that perspective. Worst case scenario for me, I see them 8-4, 10-2 at best. Again, I'm with you on that stretch almost. We are just slightly off. I have it starting October 18th, traveling to Fayetteville, Baton Rouge after that on the 25th. They're off a week. Then they got to go to Columbia, Missouri, and then finish it up with, they finally get back to Kyle Field. South Carolina comes into town. That's a tough road to hoe there. 3 road games, and then you get at home with South Carolina, who I think is going to be a very, very good football team. If they can go 2-2 in that stretch or 3-1, hopefully, then this could be a magical year for the Aggies.
Yeah, and especially by bringing the defense there. York and Scooby Williams at linebacker, they've got to take their game to the next level. They're studs there, but they've got to really elevate that to lead this defense. And that secondary is going to be tested because these teams now, Arkansas and Florida especially, they're going to be spread teams. And if they play South Carolina, they're going to spread them out as well. These guys are going to be able to run and hold the field at linebacker and in the secondary to really help that pass rush get home. I think the ceiling for this team is 9 wins. Just because that schedule is
Really?
loaded, I don't. 10 is going to be very, very tough. You just rattled off every team they have to play, and then you have Texas on top of that. Plus, we have Notre Dame. Like
Yeah.
8 is probably the sweet spot, but 9 is probably that ceiling. If they pull off 10 wins, Mike Elko should get SEC Coach of the Year.
Is this a playoff team?
No, I don't think they're a playoff team at 9-3. 10 wins, they would have. That's the only way they can get in. I I
Yeah,
have a
that's fair.
feeling that off Marcel Reed is going to have to grow up a lot to get to become a playoff team.
All right. All right, Fresh. Let's go to our number 24 team. I was a little surprised that the Oklahoma Sooners made our top 25. There's a lot to like about Oklahoma. Picking up Mater in the transfer portal. They have Ott, the running back, coming in from Cal. Brett Venables at Oklahoma, he's got the extension. They're not going to move on from this guy. Oklahoma had a really rude awakening going into the SEC last year. But again, I also think like Lincoln Riley did them no favors. There's a huge exodus of talent when he left there, and they're kind of scrambling to pick up Venables. I think Brett Venables is a good coach. I'm leery whether or not he is a great coach for Oklahoma. I love this. I love Sooners. I think Oklahoma's a great program there. I'm just worried that they're eventually going to fall in no man's land there. They're coming off a year where they're 6-7, had some nice wins, but again, bad losses, and a lot of guys have hit the portal. What you got with Oklahoma?
Well, I think John Mateer and Jay Knott really going to have to give this offense a boost and a brand new offensive coordinator. Coming over from Washington State, bringing the same offense as Mateer, spreading it out, a little more high flying. The biggest question has always been the past few years is ever since Lincoln Riley left, the receiver talent is just
It's been
non-existent.
awful.
Deion Burks expected a lot of things from him. He's got to step his game up and completely outshine what he did last year. And the rest of the group's going to have to show up and make plays, catch the football, you know, get make explosive plays in the passing game. I think Mateer is going to be able to navigate the spread very effectively. I think much better than Jackson Arnold did last year. And then how do they work Ott in? I think Ott being a
Right.
solid running back at Cal is going to give the defense, give the safeties and linebackers something else to look at, where it's a legit threat in the backfield that they're going to have to pay attention to. So it gives you a little bit of balance the offensive coordinators can work with. So they're going to have to play at a high pace and really operate very effectively. You're not going to see it's going to be a lot of high percentage throws, a lot of put the ball in space, let the guys make plays, and then take a shot here and there. And different than a Lincoln Riley who likes to take more shots. I think you're going to be a little more patient with the offense, especially early, and then let it develop. A lot of time possession, manage the down and distance, and then be decisive when you actually go for a deep ball or try to stretch the field, not just winging it and just chucking it for the heck of it. So this offense will have a new look to it, a new refreshment for the Sooner offense, which has always been a very flash in the pan kind of a deal for the past 20 something years. But I think last year was just a major dud. They put a lot into Jackson Arnold. He was not ready. They didn't have any talent offensively. They didn't have a running back that really could take over. It was just a complete mess. And I think that goes back to what you said, Lincoln Riley leaving a disaster when he left a couple of years ago and really depleting the depth on that offensive side of the ball. Brett Venables is not a head coach, in my opinion. He's a defensive coordinator. So
Right.
I think him going back to just calling defensive plays is going to help. Him having basically an offense that's going to be like, all right, you do your own thing, get it taken care of. And then having a brand new general manager of the entire football program coming over. The former director of Reach Senior Bowl, after that was over, took the job, is now just the GM basically of Oklahoma football, handling all the off the field stuff, helping organize recruiting, taking that pressure off of Venables, I think will allow him just to coach. And coaching the players, I mean, at Clemson, he can coach defense. We're not arguing that. But I think letting him all the extra stuff that was going on really weighed him down. He was not able to just coach the team. The defense played well as the season went on last year, especially versus Alabama. So if he can really just focus on defense, let the offense come along, trust his quarterback who's a little more experienced than Jackson Arnold, things will start picking up. The schedule, though, even with all that, the schedule
Brutal.
I think it's actually much more difficult than it was last year. And you're losing Danny Stutzman, and you're losing Billy Bowman Jr. to the NFL. So your two studs on the defense are gone. Now, yep, you have Kip Lewis, which is great, but now you're really relying on R. Mason Thomas,
Hmm.
Abadawar, and then
Dalton.
Mr. Floater over here, Marvin Jones Jr., coming from Georgia to Florida State and then Florida State and out of Oklahoma. Who's going to be your pass rush? The three of them have got to step their game up. So they've got to help at all different levels. I think the secondary would be okay, but that front seven, they're going to have to make some serious strides and improvements to help boost this defense. And it's also, how does Venable scheme them up? Get them in positions to be successful. There's a lot, all the moving parts have got to be in sync for this Oklahoma defense to take the next step. Look at, I mean, at worst, to start the season, they should be 3-2. That's at worst in the first 5 games.
Yeah.
But then October 11th through November 29th, you have Texas at South Carolina, Ole Miss at Tennessee. Then you have Alabama, I believe. Let me get back real quick just to make sure my mind's running correct. At Alabama, Missouri, and then at LSU. There's not much of a break. Outside the Missouri game, I'm going to say it right now, the Missouri game is probably the break in that entire stretch. They're going to have to be locked in and play physical. This team could be 6-6 and actually play better than their
Right.
record. Might be better on the field than they were in 2024, but the record could be the same. That's a weird kind of statement, but the play, the effort, because last year the South Carolina game they gave up. They looked defeated a lot. This year the team might be a lot better and play a lot more efficient and clean football and make the opponents work for it. Because even if you look back on that game, we talked about when Tennessee went to Oklahoma early in the year. We thought Tennessee was going to beat the brakes off of
Right.
them. Nico was trash right then and there because that team did not look good offensively. Tennessee's defense played well. They won a
Hmm.
game, but they didn't dominate. And that should have paid more attention to Tennessee at that point, and also giving Oklahoma credit that they have talent on defense. The offense is terrible. So if Mateer and I can make jumps, the offensive line can play better, and the receivers can actually catch the football. I think this will help propel them. The ceiling is 9 wins. 8 is probably the sweet spot for this team, 8-4. That Michigan game is really going to tell us what we need to know about this Oklahoma team. If
Right.
they can beat Michigan, that's going to say a lot. If they play well with Michigan, because I think we're going to see a different kind of Michigan offense, but if they can play well with them, we'll know. If they get their doors beat off by Michigan, then we'll know Oklahoma's just a fraud and maybe Venables is going to be done at the end of the year. But that game's really going to tell us where the team's going to go when they hit SEC play later on.
Fresh, it's so difficult for me because I could see this team being 3-3 in SEC play and being one of the feel-good stories of college football this season, especially if they go, like, if they're 8-4 with this schedule, it's an impressive feat. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is arguably the hardest schedule in college football.
I
But
think them and Arkansas have a good argument for that.
yeah, and I look at this and I go, I put for like my toughest stretch, I put Texas after. Like
Basically, what I have the gauntlet.
right, you could take any 4 games in the last 7 games and you just take your pick which 4 you want to pick out of there and say this is their toughest stretch. Interesting kid that I'm intrigued with, and again I'm not going to reiterate what you said, especially with the quarterback coming in. Coming in, if they can kind of unlock the magic that he had as a freshman over there at Cal. I know he's battled injuries in a couple years with that. Sharp, the tight end, Bauer Sharp. This kid could be maybe a difference maker, especially we've seen it in years past where teams that, especially take a look at Penn State last year, Michigan a couple years prior to them, when you don't have elite wide receiver play or above average wide receiver play, and that's going to be the big thing for Oklahoma. What can you do? You're going to lean on your running game and you're going to lead on passes to your tight end. Sharp could be that playmaker for them and could probably pad his stats to being one of the better tight ends in the SEC because of the fact is that they lack the wide receiver depth. They really should need to have this. Again, you talk about Deion Burke. I would love to see more out of him, but until he shows me something, like it's Sharp and then a bunch of dudes, and show me something, especially week 3 was that week 3 or week 2 they get the Wolverines in a Norman there. You got to show me something with them. I think absolute best. Everything goes right. I put 8-4, 9-3. I think 9-3 is a pipe dream, but again, if everything works out for them, they're going to play Texas tough in the Red River rivalry. that game is Texas is the better team, obviously, but the, crazy things happen in that football game. They're going to be dogs in every single game in SEC play, with maybe the exception of the Auburn game. Like, they're going to be home underdogs.
Yeah. And, even last year, they just, there were games they probably didn't expect them to be in, and they were in. And there's games they expected to be blowout, and they were a very weird team. There was just games where they just did not show up, and then there's games where they go, well, Oklahoma's had to play today. It
Right.
was different. Like the South Carolina game and the Tennessee game are two great examples. They played the hearts out versus Tennessee, and they got the trash beat out of them for South Carolina. I think the defense for South Carolina are still scoring touchdowns right now. Then they play great versus Alabama, but in other games you're like, what the heck is happening?
Right.
Did they even get off the bus? And I think that also goes back to Venables not being the greatest coach, not having faith in his offensive staff, trying to do too much, and not just coaching defense. And I think that's where he's in over his head from that perspective. So hopefully, with with different restructuring in the whole entire football operations there, that gives him a little bit more to focus on. I'm going to be a leader on Saturday, but I'm going to coach my defense, and we're going to try to play that approach and not be overwhelmed myself.
Yeah. And I don't even want to say what my worst case scenario is, because I absolutely think the world of Sooner fans, man. Again, they deserve better, but, it is what it is. We're here for it. I say
So
8,
if he's 4-8, he's fired at that point.
probably. I can't see Venables keeping his job at 4-8.
I mean,
I just can't.
we're in a state right now with college football. If you're at a bit mid-major programs you got 3 years, and if you're struggling or not improving, you're done. Like last year, I think Billy Napier, he was given reprieve because the schedule was brutal, and the actual team
Right.
made progress late. This year, I think Napier's on the hot seat because he doesn't have that excuse anymore. Like
Right.
Venables, you've got to have this team improve a little bit, or that's going to heat up because Oklahoma football, the fan base, you spoke of the fan base, there's proud tradition in Oklahoma.
It is.
They do not,
Very
they don't
proud.
want to fall behind in the SEC. Even if we had 20 playoff teams, I don't think Oklahoma would be a playoff team. Like you can't be in that conversation. If there was 20 playoff teams and we're not a playoff team or even in the conversation, that's when at a high level team, you're in a fireable position. And that's where I think Oklahoma fans are like, look, if we're not even in the conversation, it's time to exit and purge and recycle.
Yeah. And the fact is that they'll probably see Texas be in the playoffs again, and that's just got to eat Oklahoma fans alive.
Yeah, that's yeah.
It's rough. All right, Fresh, let's go to our number 23 team. This one also may surprise people, but I got to admit, I agree with you on this because both of us had them in our top 25. And I think that this team is poised for a really nice year. It's the Nebraska Cornhuskers. They're ranked number 23 going into the preseason, coming off a year where they were 7-6 on the season. Everyone's going to talk about it. So let's just get it out of the way because it's the talking point that any person who uses with Nebraska. Will Matt Rule make the jump in year 3?
I mean, he's done it at Temple. He did it at Baylor.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, I think Baylor's a little more comparable to the Big Ten. Obviously, Temple, whatever, but it showed he won at Temple. Let's put it that way.
Right.
This is the biggest jump he's gonna have to really take this program because Nebraska, I don't know, maybe feel like 2012, 2013 is probably the last time Nebraska was actually like competitive for a championship or a high bowl game. Like it's been a long time. The fan base is begging for. They're probably begging for Bo Pelini at this point.
Yeah.
But you've got to take that next step. Raiola, year 2, you've got to take that next step. Now we did see when Dana Holgerson became an analyst and then eventually became the offensive coordinator, that offense definitely improved. Raiola looked more comfortable in the offense. They were able to move the football a little bit more effectively, score some more points. Like that was a big change. Now you have a full offseason of Dana Holgerson, who I think also helps Matt Rule because another former big-time D1 head coach is on that staff. The two of them can bounce things off each other to help understand what they want to do to attack a defense, or even just have a general structure of a team. They have experience. They've both been in the battles and the wars as the top guy. That's a big I think the most underrated thing of Nebraska coming in is that they have that leadership centered. You have key transfers in Dane Key, Rocco Spindler on the offensive line, Elijah Pritchett on the offensive line. all come from high-level Big Ten schools like Kentucky, Notre Dame, and Alabama. I think the three of them off the top of my head. And then add in Holgerson to really get the team on there. So you have some veteran leadership, guys who've been in bigger environments, all coming to play in a high-level program. Nebraska has to take that jump this year. The schedule is actually attainable. It's not impossible. It's all there for them. Now, the problem is this defense. They only returned four starters and to replace the entire defensive line. They lost their DC. They lost their defensive line coach. How does this defense now, the black shirts, how do they keep that reputation and improve and get off the field? There were times, even last year when Nebraska game, we thought, all right, Nebraska's defense, they're going to find ways to shut down. This is when Indiana gets taken out. That defense could not get off the field versus Kurt Signetti and Rourke and that entire offense. And it was just like, all right, now I'm taking Indiana a little bit seriously, but man, this defense just could not get off the field. Whatever they tried to do scheme wise, pressure wise, it was just not working. How does this defense elevate itself to play at a higher level? You have 18 new transfers on this team across the board. That's a lot of new faces. How fast do they all gel program wise and get them on the same page and ready to operate? Your schedule, like I mentioned, isn't terrible. You host Michigan, you avoid Ohio State, Illinois, and Indiana. So you're kind of looking okay. Yes, you have Penn State on the schedule, but there's breathing room. It's not going to be an unbearable task. The toughest four-game stretch is all in November. If you could get 6-2, 7-1 by the time you get to November,
Right.
you get USC, which I think is very beatable. UCLA they're terrible. At Penn
Yeah.
State is going to be a challenge late, and you host Iowa. If you have 6 wins heading into November, you could find two right there, get yourself 8, maybe steal one and get 9. That puts you in the conversation at 9-3, depending on who you beat. Maybe that puts Nebraska in the 15-12 range of that playoff spot,
Fun
depending on
fact
how
here
look.
for you, Fresh. Let me give you this. When was the last time Nebraska only lost less than 4 games? Last time that they only had 3 or less losses.
Ooh, 2012.
Try 2003.
So it's been
2003.
we're going 22 years now.
Yeah, there you go.
So they have to achieve something they haven't achieved. Most of these kids weren't even alive for. This is Matt Rule it's a lot, but this is going to really test him, his coaching ability, test the offense. But Rayola, there were moments last year where he kind of looked like a freshman, and there were moments he showed progress. He now has to live up to the hype and take the next step. He's coming home. His dad played there. It's time to show up and lead Nebraska to something significant. Could this team compete for a Big Ten title? I don't think they're competing for a Big Ten title, but are they in that? Maybe are they the Indiana or Illinois of last year, this year, where they finally things start clicking and they start playing at a high level? They have a chance. I think the ceiling for this team is 9 wins. I think the bottom is 7. It's just really how does this team show, and all those 18 transfers, those freshmen, the young kids, and Rayola show up when the lights are the brightest? Because we've seen, hey, Nebraska hosts Ohio State on Saturday night, 8 o'clock kickoff. Everybody's there. And at the end of the first quarter, it's 28-0. Where's the team ready to rise to the occasion in big games and show up and try to pull off an upset and get some wins? So Matt Rule, the pressure's on. It's year 3. Helderson, can the offense go? And Rayola, can you show up and get it done on big third downs and make big plays? I think there's positive traction, but this is the serious time for Nebraska football, because if they start struggling, you're going to hear this. Well, here we go again. And is Rule the right guy? Do we go through this hiring cycle again? What's the buyout? All this stuff starts playing it. So this is a very critical year for Nebraska football on that Rule.
Fresh, for me, it comes down to going to be able to protect Dylan Raiola. 27 sacks last year. This offensive line is not good. They weren't good. And then you take a look at their running game, and I get it. They threw the ball 410 times with Raiola last year, and you probably I think you probably leaned a little bit more on the passing game than the running game, even though you attempted more rushing yards or rushing attempts last year. But you weren't getting any push. Daladin is gone. Dante is gone. Emmett Johnson, I'm intrigued by him. The 5 yards of carry for him last year in kind of that backup freshman role. He could be a major player if they're able to open up some holes on the offensive line. For me, it's going to come back to the wide receivers in this group. Are they able to protect Raiola? If Raiola's not going to run himself into like some stupid sacks a couple of times like he did, you talk about that was just being a freshman. The kid did complete 67% of his passes, though, last year. So it's interesting to see if he is able to do that. Matt Rule at Nebraska, 0-5 versus the top 25 right now. That right there is a little bit concerning. You know, they're 1-4 away from Lincoln in 2024. 1-4. You take a look at their schedule that they have right now. You open up on neutral site against Cincinnati. That should be a W right there. You go Maryland, Minnesota, UCLA, Penn State. You have 4 games that are not in Lincoln this season. 4. You got those games. You should be 3-1 at least. Like the only game I'm counting as a loss straight up is Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
Maryland, I would kind of put Nebraska and Maryland kind of on equal footing because I think Maryland is a tough team. I think Loxley over there has that team always ready to play. They always do a little bit more with a lot less because Maryland's not like a powerhouse recruiting program. But again, the Maryland Terrapins play very hard. They're a good program. They'll play you tough. That could be a tough game. I'm interested, most likely here, Fresh, is I'm with you on the November stretch. Really intrigued to see how they do there. Other 2 games I got my eye on. The game against the Wolverines on September 20th, and then the game against the Spartans on October 4th. Those 2 games, it's going to be a huge measuring stick for me, especially the game with the Spartans. Because Jonathan Smith over there with Aiden Childs and what they're doing at Michigan State, we could see where Nebraska and Michigan State are going in like the pecking order of the Big Ten. If Nebraska goes in, Michigan State comes in, gets blown out in Lincoln by Nebraska, then we know that this is a team on the rise. But if Michigan State comes in and Aiden Childs and you can't handle his dual threat ability, then all of a sudden I would put more stock in what Michigan State's doing there in East Lansing than what's going on in Lincoln. If everything comes together for me, I got them up to 10 wins. If everything comes together. Well, again, on paper, which game are they dogs in? Penn State and Iowa.
Honestly, at the end of the year, they might be a favorite depending on that's the last game of the year. Right
Yeah,
now they're probably a dog, but as the season progresses, if they're going to be on that, they're probably the favorite. Because who does
right,
Iowa actually like? I look at the Iowa roster. I'm like the name now playing. That's one thing. Playing Kirk Ferentz and playing the name is one thing at the end of
right,
the year. But they've had that well tapped in the Hawkeye football department, lately. I don't know how much they have left.
right. And that's kind of why I got them going 10 wins because if everything comes together, it's offensive line, replacing defensive production. Johnson's able to carry the load as the running back. The defense is returning to that black shirt defense. And again, I think that October 5th, Michigan State, that's the kind of measuring stick game that we're going to see what kind of Nebraska team we're dealing with. But outside of that, if they lose a couple of these games early, then Matt Rule, you could be on the hot. You could find yourself on the hot seat.
I mean, we've seen it like last year. They should have beat the Buckeyes. They had
They
them.
should have.
So there's times where like this team like they're up. That's why they're ranked at 22. Just like
Right.
A&M, just like Oklahoma. There was games where they
They looked
showed
really good.
that they could actually get there and get it done. They just couldn't finish. And then there's games where they get the doors beat off them. And there's not overall consistent play.
I'm intrigued to see what Nebraska is going to do this year. But again, I have a worst case scenario 6-6.
Uh,
6-6.
I think 6-6 might trigger the hot seat warning from Matt Rule
I
because they,
do.
I mean, they went out there after the Scott Frost, fiasco and then
Was
going to the
bad.
NFL, bring Rule in, who's shown that he can win at Baylor and win at Temple. They have much more resources at Nebraska. You would think that would finally kick it in. So we'll see. Not, and I also want we are not pushing for people to get fired, but reality kicks in, folks. Like
Right.
you're paying that much money, things are happening. These coaches got to deliver.
Yeah. And I don't think Fresh and we really have ever called for a lot of coaches. Scott Frost, we did kind of say you were on hot seat watch there too. And I think also we said Mike Norvell and maybe Napier. But again, we're not calling for anyone to be fired here.
No.
But all right. Our number 22 team, well, Fresh, gotta love the state of Utah for the BYU Cougars. They're number 22 on the year. Again, 11-2 on the season. At one point, what were they ranked at one point? Was it number 6 or 5?
It
They
was
were up
five or
there.
six. Just
9-0.
it was they're that one team where you have nothing, you don't really know what to expect from them every single
Right.
year. They obviously have much more. They have guys who are much more mature because they're getting older guys, so they go off on mission. So they're not coming in here with all over the wall. So they kind of focus a little differently. But that's also parts of who do they actually have on this roster and what are they going to perform? Is this guy actually like he's not a top 200 recruit in the country? These guys they're men. You know, they're paying attention in meetings. They're schemed up well. They play hard. It's a it's always been that program, even going back to the Lavelle Edward days back in the 80s and the 70s, where they would just get dudes on the field. They would find ways to win, and they would just shock you. And the same thing right now with this team. Like this is, it's very tough to figure out what they're going to do or how they're consistent going to be year to year. But somehow they're just there and they get things done.
Yeah, they don't return a whole lot. And I went back and I looked at them. That loss to Kansas. And again, Kansas was a team that we thought was going to be better than they were last year. They were kind of bitten by injuries quite a bit. And, it wasn't like a normal loss to Kansas University there. It completely derailed their season in the second half of the year. They got returning production where it counts. Redselaff comes back. Martin comes back. Roberts, 6'4", Chase Roberts, with his 52 catches, 850 yards, and 4 touchdowns is back. I mean, I don't know. Their defense has got said here. Defense, for them to be, they're going to be good offensively. Like, they're going to be entertaining to watch. BYU is going to put up points. I could see this team easily shaking it off, putting up 27 points easy in most games. Are they going to be able to stop anybody? Like, the defense has got to be bend, don't break mentality.
And that's where I kind of we don't that depth of no one really knows what we're going to get. I just know I trust the coaching. I trust the execution of BYU,
Right.
and that's where it's not the names. It's all of them being on the same page in meetings and practice and being ready for game day. And I think a lot of teams underestimate them, and even as like media members and fans, we underestimate BYU. It's like, oh well, they don't bring in a top 50 recruiting class.
Ever.
What are we doing here? But like you mentioned, Retzlaff coming back, 5 total stars, 3 on the offensive line, which is huge. Roberts was the leading receiver and Martin was the leading rusher, but I think there's still room for them to even improve on what they did last year.
Agreed.
4 touchdowns, 52 receptions. Like, give me like 70 receptions, 1,000 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Like taking that next step, being that true number one receiver. And then defensively, only returned 3 guys, but somehow they're going to get dudes who are just going to be able to shut it down. They're going to play a funky 3-3-5 or something like that, where they're going to have a lot of guys in space building a shell and keeping everything in front of them, and then tackling. And I think the one thing about that defense is they every year they have tackle. The guys tackle. They don't miss tackles. They're in their spot. They're following their assignment. They're not getting out of space, and they make you meticulously have to drive the field and force you to be perfect. And if you make a mistake, that's how they get off the field. You said bend don't break, but that's how they operate. Like they know we have deficiencies. We're not going to land at 5 and 4 star corners or safeties out there. We're going to have guys who can play the field, assess what's happening in front of them, and then tackle and build out a scheme that confuses and brings blitzes from unique different spots. So if they can get those guys up to speed, I think they'll be in a good spot. The toughest 5 game stretch. I know I've been doing 4 from before, but we're going to go 5 here because the Holy War, October 18th.
Yep.
I got a feeling that kind of ended their season last year, and they went down there and they struggled. They didn't look themselves. Are they ready for this one? It's going to be Kyle Whittingham's last year at Utah, most likely. You get one last shot in before you're done. Then you get October 25th at Iowa State, November 8th at Texas Tech, TCU, and then at Cincinnati. And the reason why I threw Cincinnati in there is because then you travel all the way to Ohio in November. That is a BYU, that's a long trip across the country to Cincinnati for them. How do you assess and be able to ready to get off the plane and fight and play? So this team, the coaching staff is great. I really have major respect for the head coach there. He has done a fantastic job over his team, but now expectations are higher. Can they live up to them? Last year, nobody looked at them. They snuck up on everybody and made a huge run early. This year, they're going to get everyone's attention. How do they live up to that and play at a higher level to match or surpass what they did in 2024? At a, I think this team can win 10 games as a ceiling, and as a floor, I think there's 7 wins. So somewhere in that 7 to 10 range is where this team's going to finish at the end of the year.
I have it exactly the same here, Fresh. I have best 10-win season. It depends on what we get out of them. And the thing with BYU is that the minute you think that they're going to have a drop off from the previous year, all of a sudden they come up and they're gangbusters in there. You talked a little bit about like them going to Ohio to play Cincinnati November 22nd. Take a look at this. Think about this as their schedule. The first 2 games are in Provo, Utah. Their home games, Portland State, Stanford. Then you got to go to Greenville, North Carolina to play ECU. I have been to Greenville, North Carolina. There is not an airport close to that. You got to fly into what?
Durham.
I don't know where.
It's a little bit farther. Charlotte's a little farther away, so Raleigh Durham's probably the closest. But
But then
still,
you got
that's
to drive 2 hours to
you
get
have
to
to
Greenville.
bus. Yeah, that's a beast of a trip.
Then they got to go to Colorado. Then they get a game home at Utah. Then they're out to Arizona, the Holy War. Then they go up to Ames, Iowa. They have off. They go Lubbock, Texas, come back to Provo for a game, and then they go to Cincinnati. Like, whoever's got the team credit card better like have a Chase frequent flyer mile
There's
thing
miles.
going.
All players get points now. With NIL, they all should get points.
Hey, just thank God they have a very veteran, older team because 18, 19, 20-year-old kids with this much travel, you're not sleeping in your own bed. Like, that's a rough go.
Yeah, because I mean, most travelers are going to fly in on Friday. Go do a walkthrough, hit the hotel, wake up and kick off. So now you're already dealing with time change because there's the Cincinnati trip and the ECU trip, both East Coast games. So that's now you're down 2 time zones at least east. I think Provo's in the Mountain Time Zone, so that's at least 2. So
Yeah.
now you're readjust your body clock. Now we all know kickoff times are not determined by the host team; they're determined by TV. So you might not know you're not going to kickoff times until a week or 10 days in advance for most of these games. So even having to sort of get yourself ready to be organized. So being ready to play, adjusting to travel, adjusting to the hotel rooms, it's a mentality where I think the closer you are as a football team, it makes those trips easier. If you're not close, if you're not a tight knit group, that becomes exhausting, and you're not staying focused on what the main goal is of winning a football game. So back to being veteran men and these guys being a little bit older, they can probably handle that a little bit more. But the road trips, I think it was 2020 where BYU came out to Coastal Carolina when they were
Mm-hmm.
trying to schedule games like that. It's a very similar trip. Like you're flying to nowhere and then
Right.
driving on a bus for a while too.
Yeah, you take a look at 3 of their first 5 games are scheduled at 10 p.m. or later.
Well, most of those are local, so that's a good thing. At least a 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock kickoff, so it
Yeah.
gets you that entire day to help prepare
Nope.
and ready to go.
Yeah, 10 p.m. Yeah, for them it'd be 7 p.m. their time. All right, Fresh. Let's go to our number 21 team. This is interesting that we put them at 21 because they're a team that I really just don't know what to make of them because they've had a wild off season. They make the college football playoff for the first time last year. Everyone's praising them. Josh Heupel. They go into Columbus, Ohio, get the break speed off of them in the first quarter. I think Jeremiah Smith still would score on most of Tennessee's defense even now. And then all of a sudden they have the drama with Nico, and Josh Heupel tells him to pound sand. Good on him as he tries to hold the team up for more NIL money. Nico is now off to UCLA. Dylan Sampson off to the NFL. Joey Aguilar from App State is in. I think that because they have lost so much, especially on the offensive side of the football, this is going to be the season we find out really how good of a coach Josh Heupel is. Because he is not playing with a full deck. I don't even know if he's playing with a half a deck.
Oh yeah, first off, if you listen to the podcast before, you know I'm a major Tennessee hater. I what Josh Heupel and the entire athletic department at Tennessee did with the Nico situation earned my respect.
Right.
You can't, especially now, like nowadays, these kids are asking for tons of money. Yes, there's the house settlement of 20 million for an athletic department, and you can just break it up as much as you want. But what has Nico done to earn the money? And what did he even do? The last year it was a run first football team. He couldn't hit it. Him and Joe Milton couldn't hit open receivers for the majority of the time for Tennessee the past 2 years. So the whole hype around Nico, I think it was a false bravado because he was not winning games on his arm. Even when they started him in the bowl game at the end of the 23 season when they played Iowa, he ran for 4 touchdowns. He didn't throw one, which was great, but he was brought there to be a quarterback and throw the football. The
Right.
passing offense for Josh Heupel is the focus point of high, fast pace, hit the perimeters, hit the edge, then set up the running game from there. Tennessee has a dominant running game. He was a beast. And I think that helped. Everybody kept watching the scores, and we kept seeing stats like, man, Tennessee's putting up points, but it wasn't through the passing game. He was throwing
Right.
interceptions. He was making bad decisions. He was overthrowing wide open receivers. So where from the Nico family, the Emo Valiaba family, gave you the boldness to
Yeah.
demand extra money? Like this was, but I think the arrogance of it is other schools would have given the money, and people are tampering into the portal, asking guys to come out. Agents are involved. Someone's like, oh well, someone so and so will give them money. What do you want to stay and play? So I think that's a different conversation we can have about how they negotiate NIL and the transfer portal because it exposed a lot of things. And if Tennessee had settled and said, here's X amount of money, we'll give in, every player on that team would have been like, what the heck? And they would have started asking for more money because obviously they all knew he isn't just because he's the quarterback doesn't mean he's the best player on the team. And if you're in practice, the team knows if you're legit or not. The outside media, they'll just blow all the smoke they want. The guys in practice, they know who the best players are. They know if the dude's worth the salt or if he's just the quarterback they have to put out there to get the job done. I have a feeling the team's going to play better because they don't have that hanging over them now.
Right.
They don't have an ego and a family nonsense where, yeah, there were times where he'd make great throws, but I remember in the Alabama game when him and Miller are throwing picks back and forth, he rolled left. He could have run for 15 yards, and he threw the ball to the DB on the sideline. And they're like, you're in the red zone, and you threw a pick that was completely useless. There was no receiver around at all. So major props to Tennessee for saying, no, we're not doing this. Go to UCLA, go back to California, go play in the Big Ten and go 3-9 and throw 20 touchdowns and 15 interceptions, but get paid. That's cool. Do your thing. The Aguilar situation, he had flashes at App State. He was really, really good in the Sun Belt, but there's times where, like last year, App State struggled because he was
Hmm.
not able to finish the drives. The year before, yes, he helped them go beat Texas A&M, but they faded down the stretch at A&M at App State. They didn't win the Sun Belt. So he has mobility, he has flashes, but there's a reason why he was in the Sun Belt for the past few years. I think he gives them hope. He gives them a little more a guy who has some skills they can work with. The big arm quarterback side, I'm not exactly sure, but the mobility is going to add a little extra thing a wrinkle they can use. There's also the past quarterbacks have also recruited there at Tennessee, creates a competition. So I don't think it's Aguilar's job guaranteed.
Hmm.
I think there's going to be a lot of mixing and matching as the season starts to see who takes the job. And they might even go back and forth as the year goes on. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But Tennessee fans, be patient with the quarterbacks because I don't think you're going to get a finished product. You're just going to have to see how they play it out. And considering you've had Joe Milton and Nico the past 2 years, and there's been bad quarterbacks that have gone through Tennessee in the past 20, let them figure it out. It's not going to happen overnight. The running back situation, Deshaun Bishop, Peyton Lewis, these guys weren't superstar, five-star recruit running backs that are coming in there. One's a couple, actually, both of them are walk-ons. You're going to have a running back by committee approach. Let them sort of get settled in. It's going to be a different kind of offense because right now you don't have the big arm quarterback. Safeties start dropping up. The receivers struggled last year. Your quarterback's unknown. It's going to be you're not going to be putting them 60 points every single day. If you win in the game 24-20, just take the victories and enjoy it. I expect a different kind of philosophy offensively from Josh Heupel that will help play to the strengths of the defense. Big guys who have to step up offensively, Mike Matthews and Chris Brazell and Braylon Stanley at receiver. The three of them got to elevate their game. If they can elevate their game and take the pressure off whoever the quarterback is and the running game, that'll allow the offense to grow. The offensive line not running only They're going to need 4 new starters in the offensive line. It means there's a lot of inexperience there as well, a lot of youth at the receiver spot, youth at the running back spot. This offense is not going to what it looked like under Hendon Hooker. You got to be patient with it. It's going to have some struggles, but let it evolve because the defense is very good. Return 7 starters, plus a couple guys from the portal coming in. The Tennessee's defense is going to carry this football team. As a volunteer fan, take it like it's the T. Martin year. The big time offense under Peyton Manning was great. The defense still was, there's always something missing. When he left, that defense helped carry, and they had Jamal Lewis and then Fearless Price and T. Martin. The defense was rock. And they carried that offense and they won a national championship. I'm not saying Tennessee's going to win a natty, but the defense is going to carry the football team. It's going to be old school. You're not going to have 1,000 points being scored, but this defense is going to carry the balls and keep them in a lot of ball games and allow that offense to get there. Will the offense be ready for Georgia in week 3? We'll find out. As the season progresses, I think that defense will allow that offense to get them somewhere, and you'll see the back half of the year that Tennessee offense will catch up and play a lot better. They have a manageable, very manageable schedule, which allows us to actually become something that's very plausible. Yeah, you have a bookend of Florida and Georgia Florida at the back end, Georgia early, but in the middle of the schedule, it's not impossible. The toughest 4-game stretch, Arkansas, which you probably want payback, and that's in Neyland, at Alabama, at Kentucky, Oklahoma. That's not a murderer's row of a gauntlet. You can survive that. Is this team going to be 11-1 or 10-2? I think their max is probably 10-2, and that's if everything goes perfect. But the bottom, if the offense doesn't get up to speed or late by the end of the season, 7 wins is probably possible for this football team. So the defense has got to hold on tight and keep them involved and allow the offense to catch up. And the hype will, like you said, this has got you have to show up your coaching and put your pedigree to really show up now and get these quarterbacks ready to play, get the offense ready to play, receiver wise, running back wise, and offensive line, and allow them to develop over the season and be able to show up when they matter. That's going to be the biggest time factor. If he can coach them up, 9 wins are legit possible. 10 is probably the fringe and puts them in that playoff conversation. But if that offense is not ready and they have quarterback issues, 7-5 is there. They're no worse than 7-5. But it's really going to come down to has he hit the quarterback position and has that offense as a whole gel quickly and put up points.
They got the 2 recruits, Merklinger from 2 years ago and McIntyre, both 4 stars who came in. I think that both those guys might be competing with Aguilar and seeing which one's going to give them the best opportunity. I think you made a good point here, Precious. They probably will start the year with Aguilar just because he's a senior. He's been around the block. He's seen quite a bit. I won't be shocked to see one of those recruits take the reins maybe halfway through the school or into the season. Here, I put on here Chris Brazel Jr. or the second. I love how these guys, instead of being junior, they want to be the second. You take a look at a kid like him, 29 catches last year, 300-plus yards. He's going to be a big deal for how good this quarterback play comes into play, how good this quarterback play is for the Volunteers. Because if he's able to produce and be that true number 1 receiver, because you're losing Broom McCoy, you're losing Squirrel White, you're losing Dylan Sampson. You're losing all of these weapons that you had last season. You need someone to step up. Who's going to be that guy? You take a look at what they're going to do in the running game there. Bishop and Lewis are going to be their 2 running backs to start this season here. I think Deshaun Bishop has a really good opportunity to kind of take the reins of it. But Peyton Lewis was one of their better rushers against the Ohio State defense. You take a look at what he did in that bowl game. The kid ran for 77 yards on 10 carries. He was having a halfway decent ball game in that game. Are they able to do that? Defensive side of the football, I'm with you. They return a lot of that. Are they able to kind of replace the production of James Pierce? They're going to have to do that one as well. I put down here in my notes as well. Take a look at Gibson, McCoy, vital in coverage. That defense, one of the things that they've done very, very well is the Tennessee secondary has given their pass rush time to get after the quarterback. Does that continue? I think max for this team is 9-3. I don't think in years past we've seen the gap narrowing between a team like Georgia and Tennessee. Georgia's been the better program, but the gap was slowly, I think it's widened back out. I don't think this team is as good as Georgia. I don't think this team is as good as Alabama. And I really, if Florida does what we expect them to do, this team is not as good as Florida. I think they're in the same boat as Oklahoma, maybe South Carolina. I think South Carolina is a little bit better than this team because I really like Lenore Sellers. But the defense will keep them into the games. Again, if they can kind of reproduce that rushing attack, David Sanders, the five-star offensive tackle, that guy's a monster, man. He's going to be a legit stud on that offensive line early on in his career there. I have them at best 9-3, but again, I have them highly suspect at 9-3 because even that opening game, both you and I have talked about what's going on over there in Syracuse. And I think both of us really like what Syracuse is doing in the ACC. I think they're going to take a step back a little bit last year, but they have good things going on there. And that's not a slam dunk win for them.
No, I think Fran Brown, the Kirby Smart disciple, he's coached against Tennessee a lot. The offense for Syracuse is not going to be what it was last year.
No.
Kyle McCord and that team, they were flying high. I think the defense will take a step advance and move forward. So that's going to be a real test. Syracuse, it's not going to be a walkover. Syracuse, Tennessee is going to be a fun ball game. I think we're going to learn a lot about both teams. But I think it's actually good for that Tennessee offense. You're not going to get, sloppy State University to roll in there and put up 60 on them. You need a challenge early to really evaluate because you go against yourself in practice all summer long and all fall camp. It's great. But when the pads start hitting against somebody else, you want a challenge, especially to see where your team really is. There's no preseason football. You can only scrimmage your size. You know your teammates after a while.
Right.
That first game being a legit opponent, I think is going to get their attention. Then be ready to rock and roll. You're going to have some bumps and bruises, but it's going to allow you to really evaluate on the tape. Then get a week in between, and then prepare for the Georgia Bulldogs to come to Neyland. That I think is actually going to do more of a benefit for Tennessee than I think people or even the fans think. Like, oh, it's just Syracuse. No, they were good last year. They beat Miami. Fran Brown is going to build a program there, and they're going to rise up and cause some stir in the ACC continuously. But they're going to give a good challenge to Tennessee and get their attention early.
My only concern with Tennessee is if things don't progress for them. If, let's say, first week of the year, they lose to Syracuse. Obviously, I don't think they're beating Georgia anytime soon. And they wind up losing October 11th to Arkansas. And they're 3-3 going into Tuscaloosa. I'm worried that the wheels could fall off this program. Like, I have worst case scenario as 6-6, where the finger pointing starts happening. You're not doing your job. You're not doing this because everything was kind of built around there. Yeah, in the long run, I think Tennessee will be better because of getting out of the Nico situation. At the same time, too, I think he would have been maybe a little bit more of a steady hand with it than what they're going to have coming into the season. Again, long term, Tennessee is going to be just fine. Short term, this will be a rough year.
I think off your point there, Heupel's job's not in question.
Mm-mm.
Even if I think if they went 4-8, there might be some rumors because big boosters get pissed. But if they go 6-6 or 7-5, and there's a lot of quarterback issues, what happens so late in the process builds into equity. Going to the playoff last year builds into equity. Taking them to the Orange Bowl a couple years ago builds the equity. We're like, all right, things happen out of our control. It was weird. Reset, recycle. You're recruiting well, and go from there. That's not gonna. There's no hot seat for Heupel unless it was a 1-11 campaign. Like, then conversations are gonna happen.
Right. All right, Fresh. Well, that's our 25 through 21. It's the first 5 in our preseason top 25. But hey, folks, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell because you're going to want to check out who we got in our top 20 going all summer long, all leading up into week 0. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. Check out spinablesports.com. Want to make sure we send a special thank you to our producer, Drew. He's been with us the entire time we've been doing this podcast. He does everything behind the scenes. So special thanks to him. Make sure you're following us on social media. Interact with us. Engage with us. We'll be way more active as we're getting closer and closer to football season as well. But we are on our way. Make sure you also check out, if you're a baseball fan, Fresh has got something special going on. Make sure you check out the Power Alley podcast as well. If you keep yourself up to date with all things baseball. Fresh, that's all I got going on here. I'm ready to move us on to our top 20.
Hit us up everywhere you can, everyone. Spinable Sports at YouTube channel. Subscribe, spread the word, engage, leave comments. We want to hear from you at all times. Hit us up,
Absolutely.
spinablesports.com. Seth mentioned Power Alley Podcast on Twitter at Power Alley Pod. And also you can find us, the Irrational Confidence Podcast, on Twitter at IR Confidence Pod. And then also you can find the two of us, between Hafs and myself, anywhere throughout social media as well. But hit us up, engage. It's going to be a great summer. Tons of great articles and content coming across the board. And before we know it, it'll be media days and then kickoff right behind that. So until then, we'll talk to y'all later. Bye, y'all.